welcome to the channel. I'm back to give you guys my final picks for this Week 1 NFL DFS slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. Excited to get into it. Going to go position by position here. Starting on DraftKings, give you 5 guys I like at each position for various reasons. Things like game pace, play calling, salary, etc. Breaking this down, excited to get into it. Before we do, if you do enjoy the content at any point in this video, friendly reminder, if you could please take a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. That would be greatly appreciated. That way you don't miss any future content that I upload. And I do offer an NFL DFS premium package. It's linked below in the description. If you are getting very serious about NFL DFS, I would highly recommend it. It's going to take a lot of these things that we discussed about and give you access to the full charts. I'm going to give you guys as much free content as possible on this channel. But if you want access to the full chart and all the things that I have to offer over there, as well as far as rankings, all of that, go ahead and check that out. It's linked below. And with that being said, let's go ahead and start breaking down my top plays, starting on DraftKings with the QB position. And the top guy at the QB position as far as salary that I'm going to be targeting this week would be Patrick Mahomes, taking on the Cleveland Browns, guy that you always have to have interest in, an absolute gunslinger on this Kansas City offense that loves to throw it around the field. Looking at what they went to for a play call last year, lots of passing in this offense. 61% of the time they're calling pass plays, 39% of the time they went to the ground, and that's because they have Patrick Mahomes at the helm. Loves to throw the ball. And I don't think that's going to change this year. I'm pretty sure they're going to want to use their top weapon. And then when you're factoring in the weapons that he has around him, there are some great names and burners with guys like Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Clyde Edwards-Helaire to really use. And then he's got McCole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson. And let's be honest, I think Patrick Mahomes has shown that he can get the job done with pretty much anyone out there with his ability to create time and get the ball downfield. And then when you're looking at some of his key stats last year, true passer rating of 118.5, accuracy rating 7.5, and as far as his air yards per game, 172.3, tons of deep ball attempts for Patrick Mahomes, and tons of attempts in the red zone. So, I mean, I think that's kind of the full package when it comes to him. And then when you're factoring in his matchup against this Cleveland Browns team as far as the QB position, not really scared to go against them whatsoever. Last year, they were the 7th best team to target against QBs, allowing plenty of yardage downfield, as well as plenty of rushing out of the backfield. So that's always going to make us happy when targeting those QBs. Patrick Mahomes, the top guy that I'm targeting as far as the priced up QB on DraftKings this week. Second on the list, we have Kyler Murray taking on the Tennessee Titans. Really going to like this game from a pace aspect. Expected to be plenty of snaps that I look at in my model, even when the over-under isn't matching up. And Kyler Murray can get the job done on the ground, through the air, taking on this Tennessee team this week. And when you look at some of the weapons he has, plenty of weapons to work with as well. Of course, that's not going to hurt our feelings when you're throwing to a guy like DeAndre Hopkins on the outside, A.J. Green. You got Max Williams and Chase Edmonds out of the backfield. It's a pretty good pass-catching running back. And then, as mentioned, he can definitely scramble on the ground. As far as his pass attempts per game and everything, Kyler Murray in the system, they're going to spread it out. They're going to throw it plenty. Looking at, his pass attempts throughout the year last year, starting at week 1, 40, 38, 35, 31, 37, up to all the way to 48 and sometimes in 50 attempts at times. And then when you're looking at the play calling pace chart as far as their team overall, the Cardinals definitely do like to pass the football. 54.6% of the time they're passing it. That's not going to hurt our feelings at all. And then when you're looking at his key stats overall, had a great protection last year from this O-line and plenty of deep ball attempts, plenty of red zone attempts. And when he was able to get in the red zone, he was able to convert with the 66.7% red zone completion percentage. So that's not going to hurt your feelings either when targeting him, of course. And the pace is going to be there for you. So I think Kyler Murray is going to be a great option. Another game that I'm really going to be looking to is targeting is this Philadelphia-Atlanta game. The last thing I mentioned for that Tennessee matchup is that the Titans were the 5th best team to target as far as QBs and allowing plenty of touchdowns and passing yardage downfield. So got to like Kyler Murray. And you got to like Jalen Hurts and Matt Ryan in the same game, taking on the secondaries that do not scare us as far as the Atlanta Falcons and Philadelphia Eagles. Falcons were the #1 team to target with QBs last year. I don't think their secondary is really going to get much better. They allowed QBs to run on them. They allowed QBs to pass on them. And I think that Jalen Hurts is going to be a great option this week at a 6'4" price tag. I think he's going to run the ball a ton. I think he's going to be able to pass it very effectively on this secondary. They do not scare me whatsoever, and I think he's got a great price tag over here on DraftKings. He's definitely a guy that I'm going to be looking to this week. And like I said, no issues with you running it back to Matt Ryan. Both of these QBs should have plenty of weapons to throw to. And, you know, Jalen Hurts with his new weapon in Devontae Smith, the solid tight end core in Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz. And on the Falcons side, Matt Ryan still has Calvin Ridley, although he lost Julio Jones. Great weapon, Russell Gage. I think he's still going to be able to throw on this Eagles secondary. So both of those guys looking intriguing to me. Then we have Mac Jones taking on the Miami Dolphins, and he simply made my list because when you're not expected to be a starting QB and then you get thrown into that role with the cut of Cam Newton, obviously that's going to create a huge value. He's only 4,400. That's unheard of at the QB position, although this might not be the best matchup taking on the Dolphins secondary, which was the 20th best target last year. I do think that he's going to be a great play. And, you know, a little bit of a sneak peek as to my projections here for you with this QB position. Feeling a little generous on week 1, so there you go. And let's transition over to the running back position. Switching over to the running back position, I think it goes without saying that we're always going to have interest in targeting Christian McCaffrey at the top here at 9.5, though. I love him this week, always going to love him, and I think that with his price, it's not high enough to scare me off him. This guy's going to be involved in every asset of the game, passing game, the running game, maybe even the throwing game. He's that involved. And he has to take on a New York Jets team this week that really doesn't scare me overall. They're a 4.5 favorite. If they get ahead in this game, hopefully he can get some even more carries, really rack up his fantasy totals. And when you're looking at the Jets as far as how they were against the run last year, really not that great, considering the Jets known for being kind of a sting-heavy defense that can really slow people down in the years past. I don't really think that's the case now. 11th best team to target against running backs, and Christian McCaffrey is really matchup-proof at times. Got to have interest in him at the top. Second on the list, I have interest in James Robinson taking on the Houston Texans. Not exactly expected to be the fastest-paced game in the world, but I expect James Robinson to be involved in the game plan heavy here, taking on this Texans team, who last year just could not stop anyone on the run, and I don't expect their defense to get much better this year. Absolutely terrible in all aspects of the game, slowing down running backs last year. Not good against the run, not good against the pass, against those running backs, allowing lots of passes to be caught out of the backfield. And I think that James Robinson could be in for a huge performance in this one due to it. Had a large snap share last year. When you're looking at his evaded tackles, drew great yards created per game with a 30.2% clip. He stands out as one of the best on my sheet as far as that's concerned. So a guy that can create plays, get out for you, and really make things happen, taking on a terrible Houston Texans run D is definitely a guy that I'll have interest in. Joe Mixon, a guy I expect to get even more involvement in the offense this year. There's no more Giovanni Bernard to be cutting into his workload, so I expect him to be involved a lot more in the pass game, taking on a Vikings defense who also really struggled against the run last year. 6th best team to target overall, and also really struggled at slowing down pass-catching running backs out of the backfield as far as receiving, giving up lots of receptions and lots of yards given up to those running backs. So you always like to see that, of course. And we know when Joe Mixon has gotten the opportunities, he has been a pretty shifty running back himself. I'd expect him to really be able to get out and create plays. Not too many breakaway runs last year, but I think that's going to change, and I really do have interest in him in week 1. And I also have interest in 2 pass-catching running backs that might be lower owned on this slate with Antonio Gibson and Chase Edmonds taking on the LA Chargers and the Tennessee Titans. Both of these games expected to be a pretty up-tempo game. Both of these guys that can really pass catches out of the backfield. And on a site like DraftKings where you get credited with that, you know, I'm definitely going to have some interest in targeting the Chargers and the Tennessee as far as how they were comparing against running backs. Titans giving up a lot of pass-catching stats to running backs last year. And the Chargers, the same is going to apply for them, who did a much better job of slowing down running backs on the ground. But as far as pass-catching running backs, didn't have quite as much success. So I definitely do like Antonio Gibson, Chase Edmonds, both guys that can pass catches out of the backfield. Chase Edmonds last year, 68 targets. I think he continues to see his target share climb as a running back. So like that on the PPR format on DraftKings. Switching over to the wide receiver position. At the top, the first guy I'm going to be looking to is Davante Adams. Really liking this game from an over-under aspect. I think there's going to be plenty of points scored in the Green Bay-New Orleans game. And on the Green Bay offense, it all starts with Davante Adams. This guy had a ridiculous target share last year, a 34.1% target share of this offense. Practically 1 every 3 passes is going his way. Actually, that's exactly, if not more, based upon the percentage. And red zone targets, 27 red zone targets last year. Going to him early and often is Aaron Rodgers. And then, of course, when you factor in the fact that his QB is Aaron Rodgers, that is not going to hurt your feelings. Great guy to have you throwing you the football. And then when you're breaking down the matchup against this Saints secondary, they're not one that scares me all too much when it comes to Davante Adams, because he is Davante Adams. I mean, I'm just not worried about it. He's going to have the target share. He's going to have plenty of receptions, and he's definitely a guy that I'm looking to in week 1. Second on the list, we have Stephon Diggs, another guy that saw the ball early and often last year, and I expect him to continue to see the ball thrown his way from Josh Allen. Comes in at 7-6 this week on DraftKings. 6.5-point spread with a 27.25 implied total for his team. Expected to score plenty of points. As far as his target share and everything, last year a 29.2% target share for him, with plenty of contested targets, plenty of contested catches as well. I know that's not exactly the top thing we're prioritizing for fantasy, but it definitely doesn't hurt our feelings. And then when you look at the red zone targets, another guy that's heavily involved. So I definitely like Stephon Diggs at his price point, and his matchup taking on the Steelers is not one to deter me away, especially when you're factoring in the implied total for his team. Just think he's going to have a big week. And the last 3 guys I want to talk about are all great values on this slate as far as DraftKings are concerned. Marvin Jones Jr., Marquez Callaway, and Terrace Marshall Jr. all way too cheap for their particular roles and matchups. Marvin Jones, Jacksonville now taking on the Houston Texans, the team that is terrible defensively. You're going to continue to see us talk about them a lot this year, I have a feeling, because they're just that bad. 7th best team to target as far as wide receivers are concerned. Marvin Jones expected to really step up and have a huge prominent role in this Jacksonville offense, with the new young talented QB coming in finally in Trevor Lawrence. And I think that he's just way too cheap. I'm sure he's going to be massively owned, but for good reason. Same thing's going to go for Marquez Callaway. With there being no Michael Thomas to start the season, I'd expect him to have a heavy workload for this Saints team, and he's too cheap at 3-4. Number 1 wide receiver for Jameis Winston to be going to. Price that cheap. Not going to, phase me in targeting him whatsoever. Packers were very good in the secondary last year, but I still think you have to be looking his way at this 3-4 price tag. And the same rule is going to apply for Terrace Marshall Jr. at $3K. That's way too cheap for the role he's expected to have with the Panthers. I think he's going to have plenty of targets going his way early on in the season here, and a minimum salary in week 1, taking on this New York Jets team. Definitely have interest in him. So a little bit of pay-up options for you, a little bit of value, and let's go ahead over to the tight end position. And at the tight end position, going to continue to talk about a lot of the same games that we've been talking about so far, but for good reasons. Great spots for these guys as well. At the top, we have Travis Kelce taking on the Cleveland Browns. His team with that huge total, as mentioned, pairing him up with Patrick Mahomes, probably a great option for you out there on 81.6% of snaps last year. And this guy's just an absolute beast. We know what Kelce is all about. He's practically a wide receiver that plays the tight end position. Looking at his key stats across the board, yards per reception, 13.5 really pops. 83 air yards per game as a tight end. Tons of red zone targets with 22 red zone targets last year. Guy's just an absolute beast. A ton of hot takes saying he's a great play, and I definitely have interest in him in week 1. Second on the list is going to be George Kittle taking on the Detroit Lions. He's also a guy that's just an absolute beast. An 8-point spread for his team. Expected to be involved early and often at the tight end position. Another guy that should be a target share beast. And we were looking at his stats from last year. That is exactly the case. 10.1 yards per target, 13.2 yards per reception for him, 57.5 air yards per game. And when he gets into the red zone last year, not a lot of targets, but I don't think that's a thing that would remain true. And both of these guys, matchups, I think that they can handle. The Browns are really terrible against the tight end position last year. And as far as Kittle is concerned, taking on the Detroit Lions, they weren't exactly the friendliest matchup overall, but I think he's just that much of a talent where you have to be prioritizing, especially on week 1. I just have a feeling these tight ends are going to even continue to be priced up even more. And then these 2 guys in the Philly-Atlanta game, I'm definitely going to have interest in Kyle Pitts and Zach Ertz. Expected to be a fast-paced game. I mentioned having interest in both the QBs. Definitely going to have interest in both of the tight ends. And when you're looking at how these guys fared against tight ends last year, Falcons continue to be terrible defense, continue to target them, and the Eagles weren't very good against the tight end position either. So I definitely like both of those guys in that particular game. I think Dallas Goedert is also a viable guy to be going to on Philly as well. And Anthony Ferguson will be the last guy if you're really needing a cheap salary relief option in this Tennessee at Arizona game. Expected to get a lot more workload now. There's no more Jonnu Smith there. And I think that for that reason, he can definitely have a much bigger year than he did last year. Only out there for 30% of snap share. He's a cheap guy to be targeting here. Great contested catch rate, and I think he can go up there and get it in traffic. So, an increased role here, a great matchup taking on Arizona, and I definitely do think that we can be targeting Erkster. So with those guys out of the way, let's go ahead and transition over to FanDuel, figure out the top 5 guys I'll be targeting at each position over there. Switching over to FanDuel, their salary cap tends to be a little bit more lenient, usually some guys that we can really jam in for some value that allow us to get up to QBs pretty easily, and for that reason, you'll see a lot more priced up options on my sheet. I mean, a lot of these guys we already went over, but love Mahomes, we talked about him. Kyler Murray, love him. Josh Allen's a guy that I really do like targeting week in and week out, the way he just runs on the ground all the time, and a guy that, I think is going to be much more affordable to get to on FanDuel, and a guy you always have to have interest in. I always do have interest in him. Of course, I'm going to have interest in him on DraftKings, but, we have to talk about some of these salaries, like Mac Jones is a lot cheaper over there. But Josh Allen going to be a guy I'm not afraid to target with that 27.25 implied total for his team. Of course, going to really like him. And Russell Wilson also, a guy that can scramble and pass. Taking on this Indianapolis Colts team, a guy that I definitely do think you can fit in your lineups over on FanDuel, and a guy that I do have interest in. So those are going to be the adjustments as far as FanDuel at the QB position for me over here. Let's go ahead and transition over to the running back position. All right, moving on to the running back position over here. It's not PPR, so things are going to be a little bit different for me. But at the top, I still do like Christian McCaffrey at 10-4. I think he's just worth paying up for. Even though, you don't get the points per reception, you do get the points for receiving yards, you do get the points for running yards, and Christian McCaffrey is definitely going to chew those up. I still like Joe Mixon over here at the 7.2 price tag. I think that's too cheap. And James Robinson specifically really stands out to me at 5.9 on FanDuel. I talked about him over on DraftKings. Really going to like him on FanDuel. That's just way too cheap. So definitely liking James Robinson. And the two guys I had not mentioned over on DraftKings that are sticking out to me a little bit more on FanDuel with the non-PPR format are going to be Najee Harris taking on the Buffalo Bills, and Mike Davis in that same Atlanta-Philadelphia game. Philly has been really good against the run, but at this 6.2 price tag, I think he's just too cheap on FanDuel. I think he's someone you can definitely be putting in your lineups to be able to afford to pay up for some top-end wide receivers if you want to go there. If you want to go the other route and pay down for some wide receivers and pay up at running back, I've given you some options there. So with that being said, let's go ahead over to the wide receiver position. At the wide receiver position, we do have some similar names here in Devontae Adams and Stephon Diggs at the top. I had mentioned them on DraftKings. I definitely do equivalently like them on FanDuel. I think they're just two top options on this slate this week you have to be getting in your lineups. And then as far as some price discrepancies over here on FanDuel, I definitely think there are some 3 guys that I really do like from a value aspect. One of them I already talked about on DraftKings in Marvin Jones Jr. taking on this terrible Houston secondary. 2 of which I did not mention on DraftKings, and I think on FanDuel their price tags really stand out. The first one's going to be T. Higgins taking on the Minnesota Vikings. He's a guy that I expect to be involved very heavily with Joe Burrow in this Cincinnati passing attack. With a 22.25 implied total, a 3-point spread, and expected to be playing from behind in this one. I think they could be throwing the ball his way many times, and I do think that the price tag's just too friendly over on DraftKings, so I definitely like him. And lastly, Devontae Smith. We had mentioned I do like Jalen Hurts. I think Devontae Smith is a great pairing option here on FanDuel, specifically at only 5.3. That's way too cheap of a price tag. A great salary relief option to be able to fit in some more upper tier guys at other positions, maybe like a Christian McCaffrey. I think Devontae Smith taking on this terrible Atlanta secondary is a viable play on FanDuel for sure. Let's go ahead and transition over to the tight end position. And lastly, at the tight end position, my targets are practically going to be the same across each site, except for one exception with Logan Thomas. I don't really think it's necessary that you need the salary relief with Ferguson with them being so closely priced on FanDuel. And I think Logan Thomas is going to be one of the best tight ends all season long with the target share that he's been receiving in this offense. So with them being so more priced closely on FanDuel, I will gladly go to Logan Thomas rather than having to drop down. And not that I don't have interest in him on DraftKings either. Just keep in mind, I'm trying to give you guys some top plays in each price range on both sites, and I definitely think that Logan Thomas stands out as a value on FanDuel for sure this week. So I would definitely be looking his way, and those are definitely going to be my top options over there on FanDuel this week. All right, so there you have it, guys. Top 5 picks, each position on each site on DraftKings and FanDuel this week. Really liking those guys in their price range, the upside they offer, etc. A little bit of a jam-packed schedule this week. Typically trying to get a top stacks video to you guys. Maybe I could possibly make that happen. If you really want to see that video, go ahead and leave a comment below. Leave a like on this video. And lastly, if you did enjoy the content, don't forget to 1, hit that like button, 2, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future content that I upload. Wish you guys all the best of luck in this Week 1 NFL slate. Lots of prizes to be won, so hopefully you go out there and get yourself a big win. And we will see you in the next video.